Welcome back to Expert Instruction, the Teach by Design podcast, where we dive deeper into the research surrounding student behavior by talking with the people who are implementing these practices, where they work, and with the students that they support. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and today we're going to be talking about the ways that you can support social emotional growth and positive mental health in your school. I've been thinking about this topic a lot this week, not just because, we have this podcast episode that we're recording, but also because in my personal life, I've had some really deep conversations with some friends and family about their own struggles with maintaining a positive mental health. In fact, I think it wasn't until I was actually an adult that I had started to have open dialogue with other people about my own emotional well-being and how I can support them with theirs. And something that I've started to realize is just having the language to describe an emotion has been something of like a revelation for me. Those initial conversations that I had with people when I was feeling some kind of way were real awkward. Right? I didn't know how to talk about it, and I didn't actually know what they wanted to hear or what would be useful for them to hear. But like most things, the more that I practiced, the easier it got. And then when this pandemic hit, I started to struggle at times. I knew what I had to do to ask for help. And my friends and my family knew how that they could actually come and talk to me when they needed support. And I know that all of that is something that we can do with our students too. And that's what we're going to talk with my guests today about. Our first guest is Dr. Brandy Simonson. She's a professor of special education, and she's the co-director of the Center for Behavioral Education and Research at the University of Connecticut. She's also the co-director of the Center on PBIS and a senior advisor to the National Center on Intensive Interventions. She's also an editorial board member for the Journal of Emotional and Behavioral Disorders. And Susan Barrett will also join us. Susan is a director for the Center for Social Behavior Support at Old Dominion University, as well as an implementer partner with the Center on PBIS. She also co-leads the development of the Interconnected Systems Framework, which is a mental health and PBIS expansion effort. Each one of these women is a multi-hyphenate in the world of PBIS and mental health. We'll talk to them today about their recent social media campaign, #SchoolWellnessPBIS, how they came up with it, as well as what we can all do to support each other to promote positive mental health in schools. And we're not just talking about students either. We'll also focus on what we can do to support each other as adults too. Welcome, Susan and Brandy. Thanks for joining us today. I'm really glad to have you guys here.
Thanks for having us.
In stereo.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we should just get it all out there that we're all just feeling like a little bit nervous, but that's okay. That's okay. It's a podcast. We're just talking. So the first question I really want to start out with, so May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so this is sort of how the conversation has come to the attention in this particular podcast. But I'm curious to know from you guys, what is it about this specific point in time that feels like it's important to have this be something that we talk more about?
Yeah, so I'll start off and then I'll tag in Brandy.
Yeah.
I think before the year 2020, we were pretty much trying to sell this notion that mental health was an important part of overall health. And I think in this time now, all of us are recognizing how important it is to have strategies and skills to help us handle stress. And this has been the year of stress with multiple crises going on at the same time. And I think that we're having to do we don't have to sell this as much because again, there's this recognition that we all need ways to figure out how to process what's going on. We need strategies for calming ourselves down when we really feel these emotions kind of taking over. And so, yeah, I think it's really important for us to really think about mental health being part of overall health, which is important in the school context, because I think we've always considered when we get good grades to be a portrait of a healthy a student is all around kind of the academic pieces. And so I think there's, again, this recognition that that mental health is part of overall health, which is part of academic health. And so it's kind of this whole child, whole person kind of momentum shift that's going on, so that we're kind of having this equal space and opportunity to increase academic health and wellness in the space of education.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I echo everything Susan said. And I think that we've also learned both through research and practice that mental health and wellness, they're skills that we can teach. So I think kind of the old conceptualization was that they were static and they were kind of within person characteristics. And I think we've realized how much we can help support students, but also teachers and families in this space.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I don't remember having any kind of lesson around what is it, how do you handle stress, or how do you handle, like, what is this feeling that you're feeling? Like, my first real thought about mental health existing on some sort of spectrum between like not fine and fine came as an adult, really. And I think that as we continue the conversation in school, we actually can help students make that realization sooner, and we can give them those strategies that can help them in those moments of small stuff that comes up. Like for me, when I had my first real experience with anxiety, I think in math class. There was a test that was coming I was really nervous for. And we only had, just like all things, like all tests, you only have a certain amount of time that you have to take it. And I needed longer to finish. And I just felt it building and building and building. And I was like paralyzed. I couldn't get myself to actually just do the work. And so I think it is just like recognizing some of these little things that can come up and giving students strategies to recognize it in themselves, to see it in others, and how they can overcome that or support each other. So what are some of the things that you guys see in like elementary, middle, and high that are like common struggles that people have or that students have that maybe teachers could recognize? And what are some ways that they could help students to cope with that?
I think you raise a really great point in that, oftentimes we think when we hear the term mental health, we've been conditioned to kind of think of it in terms of a diagnosis or a label or part of an illness, right? And so I think one of the major ways that we can kind of overcome that is for schools to build strategies that really offer opportunities to see mental health in different ways. And mental health has this like full continuum of things that we can do. And part of that is making sure we have a positive school climate, making sure we have predictable routines and consistent routines and a schedule that's we can predict and that it's positive and that we feel like somebody in the school really cares about us and notices when we're feeling kind of off in a day. That's what mental health looks like. So part of it is the strategy of recognizing that mental health is that kind of this full continuum of things. And they're really small things we can do each and every day, those micro moments each and every day that really make a significant difference to kids and to staff in the school. And so the whole kind of rationale with this campaign that we're driving is to kind of break those things into daily doses of wellness strategies that we can start to deliver and build habits and form routines so that we don't just do this right now during a stressful time in everybody's life. This perpetuates for forever, that we constantly are recognizing that we all have signs, we all have symptoms that of different aspects of this continuum. Yeah. And that there's somebody there that can help us, and there's ways, skills, and strategies to navigate through that.
Yeah, I always think about, and Susan said this, I think, so much more eloquently than I will, but what are the things we can do in advance to set ourselves and set our students up for success? So how do we, as Susan mentioned, create a positive and welcoming climate? How do we welcome kids into that space with greetings? How do we make sure there's predictable routines that kind of allow us all to feel safe and know what comes next? How do we teach positive expectations so that we're focusing on what we want to see? And how do we teach kids to recognize their own kind of specific strategies they need to set themselves up for success, to feel calm or to feel safe? And on the kind of back end, as you were saying, when you have a feeling that's not a pleasant one, whether it's anxiety or whatever,
Yeah.
what strategies can we teach explicitly for kids to handle those, or for us as adults to handle that? And then how do we access help when it's too big for us? So that full continuum of supports, I think it's too much for any one person to think about doing it all. So that's where I love what Susan and others have put together in terms of a framework, so that there are things I can do as a teacher, there's things I can do as a student, but there's also people I can go to when I need extra help. And there's a full range of from proactive to responsive strategies.
And
So what are some of those things do you think that they could do, like those small things? You've talked, so maybe we should catch people up. You've got a campaign that's going on Twitter, or has been going on, and will likely finish, I think, by the time this comes out, or will soon finish. Anyway, it's called #SchoolWellnessPBIS. This is the Twitter campaign that's going on through the Center on PBIS. And I wanted to know just a little bit, just give people a little bit of background on like when this came up. How did you come up with this little brainchild? And what were the expectations that you had going into this, that you wanted to teach folks? And then I want to hear what some of the those little daily doses, some of those that folks could actually like go back and look at, and some of the resources, but like, what are some of the things that they could do tangibly that would be small, but super helpful to students? I know it was a lot. I threw a lot at you.
So one of the things we recognized in this year and a half or so, there's been so many resources flooding the space in education, and they've been spectacular. I'm geeking out on the fact that we're focused on mental health, that we're having this conversation, and that it's coming up on a daily basis, right?
Right.
I feel like in many ways we are drinking from a fire hose with all of the resources kind of coming at us. And so we really wanted to kind of slow the pace down a little bit and curate the resources in a really kind of
so helpful.
Yeah. So we did this kind of daily dose, if you will, of some simple tips and strategies. And if you wanted to dig a little deeper, we've got a resource that kind of backs up that little tweet. And we wanted to kind of showcase some of the work that our center has produced during this time, and others have produced, because there's a ton of great stuff.
So much.
It just needs to be. It's just too much if you're looking at it one time. So that was kind of the background. I think one of my favorite things that's come up, and it's been researched, is a simple greeting to students, that positive greeting at the door, and recognizing that we have to kind of alter that due to physical distancing during COVID. But you still, when students come in and there's an authentic hello and an adult welcoming you into the space, your brain just lights up, right? And it sets the tone, a positive tone for the day. And it's something so simple that we should be doing every single day. And I'll take that a step further. And what I would like to see is that no matter when you show up at the door, even if there's just 5 minutes left in the class, it's still a positive greeting. It's still, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you were able to make it today. Have a seat. And then get caught up later about what the reason was behind being late. It doesn't matter. They're there in front of you now. Let's make sure that the first moment is a positive one.
And I think a couple of other pieces connected to that is then how to make that easy for teachers. So we shared a resource around how to develop habits of practice for educators. So it doesn't feel like one more thing you're remembering. It's just how you always start your class. And I think the other thing I've taken away from some of the resources that have been tweeted is around how do we build that same level of support and welcoming environment for the grownups. So having you start the first professional development day as you're coming into the building, that you're greeting your colleagues and each other, because I think everyone is having a rough time or could be having a rough time. And this is a way to create some of those positive connections, obviously for the kids, but also for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There was one that that I read that was about it was a welcome back phone call, I think, and there was a really cool resource around that had questions that you can ask when you make a phone call to a family, just to get to know them, to share your teaching style and your motivation, and get a sense of what they expect and hope for their student and what you expect and hope for their student. But it made it just so easy to like, oh, these are simple questions, and the phone call doesn't have to take 30 minutes. But there were also really nice, like, I don't know, that one of the questions I think was like, is now still a good time? Like I was just like, of course, like what a good way to like set a tone, to be like, your time is valuable and so is mine, you know? So I don't know, that was one that I thought was a really nice, tangible strategy for engaging families. I see a little person.
Engaging families.
It's been, I mean, let's be real about it for a second, right? Like, we're doing all of this stuff from our homes, and like I have felt a stress and pressure to maintain some semblance of like professionalism in my house where my family lives, you know? And it's like, no one can know that there are like tiny people running around or something. And it like builds and it adds to this, like, the stress of trying to get through the day, you know, is to try and maintain some like surface level of presentation to the world. So having your little people running around behind you, Brandy, is so normal, and I'm excited to see them.
Yeah. And my son's first day of senior year was today, so I just sent him off. So
it's so cool. Everyone's starting to go back into normal times, which has also been wow. I went to a restaurant with my husband to go and like get food and take it home. And when we got there, she asked us if we wanted to go inside. I was like, what? Go inside? We can go inside? Like, and it felt like I had never been, something that I have done like my whole life, going into restaurants to eat. It felt like it was such a foreign concept to me. Like, do I keep wearing my mask? Is there a menu? Do I order off my phone? Will someone come to the table? How do I pay? And it just like, I just was like, I got to relax in here, you know? So I can only imagine, as students are starting to return to school and doing school in new ways, but in a very familiar setting, it has to feel a little disjointed or jarring to be in that space.
Yeah, we keep just saying, you know, prepare to be exhausted, because you're navigating a whole new routine, a whole new landscape, and trying to figure out the rules. And that takes a lot of brain power. And so we're finding that many people who have gone back after being gone for so long are really, really exhausted, and they're having to take special care, extra biology breaks, extra water breaks, extra stretching breaks. And so that's also like a really simple thing we can be doing inside our daily schedule, is making sure that we start to see stress come alive in our classroom, is to kind of take a pause and maybe put some music on, or maybe dim the lights and have a couple of deep belly breaths. Mm-hmm. So those are simple strategies. And while they sound really simple, you know, we as educators have never been asked to do this before. And so it feels really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so it's really important, kind of going back to what Brandy had offered, is taking care of our staff and making sure that we're doing morning huddles and we're building their fluency and their confidence level with kind of stepping into this space and acknowledging that this, for many of us, is really uncomfortable. And so to kind of be able to get time and space together to figure out what this is going to look like and sound like and be comfortable with it, we have to give a lot of grace to our staff. And then the second thing that I think you brought up, which I think is really important, is that many people never stopped going to school in this country. So there's this huge variability of what we've all experienced this year. And I think just, again, being really mindful that some students have been in school most of the year and don't have the same kind of protocols. Some students have been in virtual. Some students in virtual have thrived. Some students have not. And so just, again, making sure we know our students' name. We can pronounce our student's name correctly. We know their story. We know their preferred teaching learning context. We know a little bit about their strengths, about, it's navigating all of that is going to be really important too.
There's another piece related to all of that we're hearing from folks who have been back or maybe were never paused, which is the level of intentionality behind some of the things that used to just come more naturally. And you kind of raised this when you talked about the restaurant piece. Now that we're all masked, as we're talking about creating relationships and a welcoming environment, that sends a very different signal. So you have to be more intentional with your words because your nonverbals are literally hidden.
Yeah.
And things like ensuring physical distance can set teachers up that instead of a welcoming feeling, it's kind of a pushback. And so as the grownups, then that means that we're having to be extra thoughtful about, as we welcome kids into the classroom, how do we make sure they feel that and experience that while we're still thinking about physical health and safety. And so I think that's both exhausting, but also an opportunity to be really intentional about these practices in ways we may not have had to be before. Some of them felt natural, and we're going to now have to pay attention to them.
Mm-hmm.
There also aren't natural ways to ask for help, right? Before, if you had a relationship with a teacher or that you felt comfortable with, or, you went to go see the school nurse, or you went to go see the school counselor or another important individual, there were times in the day where you could just kind of pop into the office. Well, you can't anymore. And so again, we have to be really intentional and design explicit ways for our kids to ask for help and be on the lookout and recognize when patterns kind of emerge that are a little worrisome, and then have a request for assistance process that gets help really, really, really quickly to the student or to the staff, right? Because we need to do the same thing for staff that we're doing for students right now.
I really love the things that you guys are talking about, because I think what I've been looking at online, as far as what can schools do to help support social emotional learning and positive mental health, they end up being a lot of things that are like deep breathing exercises and yoga and, taking breaks and like that kind of stuff, which is all really good, right? None of that is bad to do. It's all really important stuff. But there are also some like real logistical things that can get people the support that they need more efficiently. Things like this request for assistance process, making sure that you've got it, just paying attention to like your students and their overall demeanor and being like, Rodney doesn't seem so great today. I'm going to go check in with him intentionally, like those kinds of things for individual students, I think are really important to remember. And the other thing that you guys are talking a whole lot about is like building relationships and making it okay and giving students language to say, I am not doing great today. And in order to do that, you actually have to have a relationship with someone. There has to be a trust level there that you're going to treat that with care and kindness and help them through that moment. So all of this stuff is so great. The other thing what comes up for me next actually is a super great transition to our segment that we like to call After School, where we talk with our guests about the strategies that they're doing in their own lives, the resources that they find to be useful in this particular moment. And so when we're talking about teachers specifically and the things that we can do to be supportive of each other as adults, what are the things that you all are doing, or the things that you read, or a strategy that has been useful to you in your own lives for dealing with this like time?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think we're all really stressed out. I think Zoom stresses us out. We were talking earlier.
We were like, do we have to be on video?
I know. Nobody likes to watch their face and on video all the time. And moving from one Zoom to the next, we haven't had the luxury of having a biology break in between that. So that's been a bit stressful. I think for me, taking walks, making sure that I'm outside, making sure that I love music. So music's been a big part of my wellness kind of piece and self-care. And then making dinner with my husband and just learning how to cook and learning something new has been really fun. I think in the professional domain, though, I know that we are taking time out in many of our calls and meetings to have wellness checks with each other and just give time to laugh about something or be sad about something or just process something. So I feel like there's like this emotional support in the team meetings that we're having. And I'm hoping that in our schools across the country, that in their meeting agendas, they're trying to populate wellness and moments of learning about each other and making sure that there's an emotional support dynamic taking place inside our meetings.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything unique or different from what Susan said. I think I've been more intentional about taking care of my health. I think sometimes, like many people, I tend to put work and other things ahead of my personal priorities. And so making sure I get enough sleep. I mean, things that in the past I would have honestly sacrificed to do more work. I think also for me, as you saw with my kids at home, it's been making sure we have positive and predictable routines in our house. So making sure that kind of I'm set up to know what's expected and all the other people and pets in my house are set up with what they need to be successful. And I loved what Susan said around finding kind of moments of joy, whether it's cooking. For me, it's absolutely not cooking, but finding in, things that you like doing, whether it's connecting with a friend or family member or doing something fun together. One of the silver linings, and I've shared this with Susan before, one of the silver linings for me of having my kids at home is I haven't gotten to teach kids for a very long time. And so when everything felt crazy at the beginning of the pandemic, sitting down and teaching my then 6-year-old daughter explicit reading instruction, which probably doesn't feel like a super calming routine for other people, but for me, that experience was so calming because we could kind of do something together that was positive and it was predictable and I could see her growth. And so I think some of those things of like, for each person, it's going to be different, but finding your joy.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just, we've been talking a lot about self-care and, but I want to recognize that, we do have a certain level of responsibility to take care of ourselves. But I think the larger context is the collective care. How do we take care of each other? How do we slow down and stop and build a sense of community with staff, right? How do we create organizational health for staff and build an ecosystem where everybody, whether you're living, learning, or working in that environment, is thriving in that environment? And paying really close attention to how we can structure that for staff. And so I just wanted to call out and recognize that there's self-care and then there's collective care. And I'm more interested in the ecosystem that drives that collective care notion.
Yeah, and it's checking in with each other, even when things are going okay, and just making that like a predictable routine that I'm always going to ask you on. Like my good friend who lives in Washington, D.C., and I'm all the way over on the other coast, finding a good time to talk to each other requires planning. So we have it like as a standing date. We have a Tuesday every month where we check in with each other. And so it doesn't have to be that I'm checking in with you when you're not feeling great or when something chaotic is going on in the world. I'm going to check in with you on this day every month. And we can just talk about the things that are going right. And it'll be a space where you can just share if something isn't going great, but being predictable about it with her has really taught me that I can check in with people on a regular basis and they can come to rely on the fact that I'm going to come and talk to them and ask them how they're doing, regardless of whether I see them struggling or not. So I think that's great. Well, ladies, where can folks find more information about the good works that you're doing? We've got the Twitter campaign. What's the hashtag?
Hashtag,
I think it's hashtag school wellness.
PBIS. Yeah.
There it is.
Hashtag. So sorry for that.
That's okay. That's okay. So folks can find the Daily Doses Facebook, there on Twitter.
Yeah, our Facebook, our Twitter page. We've got an Instagram feed. Our website has been completely reformatted and There's a ton of resources on there in the Return to School. And Brandy, I don't know if you want to talk about kind of how we structured that. We tried to simplify that a bit, but if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So when folks go to pbis.org now, the kind of the scrolling banner, the very first thing that pops up is this page around supporting schools during and after crisis. Mm-hmm. And so we've done a few things. One is that we have this slightly monster guide there. So for folks working at the state district or school level, that can become a place that they can then branch out and get a ton. But given the conversation we were having earlier about people feeling overwhelmed, we've also, from the web page itself, tried to organize resources in two ways. So one is that we have a graphic that kind of walks people through the idea of what it looks like to recover from a crisis. So the immediate response around ensuring safety, and then really kind of what they do across time to promote wellness, and then to move toward a truly integrated and supportive continuum of support for all students and all staff and all families. And then below that, we've grouped resources that are specific for states, districts, for schools and classrooms, and then for kids and families. So we've really tried to kind of help tailor and have folks find exactly what they need. Included in that kind of laundry list of resources are some great examples from schools and from families. And so I think if I was overwhelmed and just wanted to see some things of what it looks like, I might scroll all the way down and look at some of those examples and then dive in a little bit from there.
That's awesome. You guys have done such a monstrous job of like putting all of these resources together. I think in the moment when a topic that you've been so invested in for so long becomes the topic of conversation, it can be like, here's everything. And it's like overwhelming to try and get it all together and organized. So the way that you guys have done it on the center's website has been really wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate all of the things that you guys have been up to. And I hope that this just starts a conversation and that it continues for folks after this. So thanks so much.
Thank you.